So God has certain properties, all good, all loving, all powerful,
I
all
agree. Yeah.
knowing.
Yeah.
God cannot do something that is of not his nature, so he can't do something that is not of him,
Yep.
right? Okay, and then good is defined by God.
No, I don't think God defines good. I think God is good.
Is good. Yeah.
Yeah.
So would you say evil is ungodly or not of God?
So I'd say evil is the absence of being.
But then would it be okay to say that evil is ungodly or non-godly?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Sure.
Okay. So, and then the second premise would be God would not be able to allow ungodliness or evil.
No, I don't agree with that.
Okay. So you think God could allow ungodliness.
Yes.
And why is that?
Well, so here's the thing. Hello, how are you? And just real quick, how old are you?
I'm 19, man.
What's up?
Yeah, so it's actually really awesome to talk to you. I've been hearing a lot of conversations. So there are just a few things I want to ask really quickly, and then I'll give you the chance to ask me questions because I am one of the fedora atheists that you've been talking about. So just two things I want to clarify just to see if we can understand each other. In your title, I think it says convince me to leave Christianity. I already have a problem with that just because I don't like the term, not as in I don't like the term Christianity, but it seems very monolithic. There's a lot of different Christians. There's white nationalists. There's gay Christians. There's stuff like that. It feels like it's already setting up for like I hate to be that guy in a debate, but it seems like a no true Scotsman thing. So just in general, I'll talk to you about your beliefs. I won't try to necessarily make you leave Christianity, but I'll try to convince you why atheism might be a more reasonable belief to hold. Is that fair? Is that fair
Yeah,
to say?
so I just sum it up like this for Christianity.
Mhm.
I'm not talking about like a cultural Christianity. I'm talking about like a
Yeah.
dogmatic thing that Jesus Christ died and resurrected off the cross and the belief that he
Okay.
is deity.
Cool, sick. And then when I say I'm a fedora atheist, I just mean I lack belief in God. I am a
I
big
don't think
A.
you're fedora atheist because you've so far come up and been like really cordial and nice. So I wouldn't put you in that category.
Well, I was roasting you in the chat earlier, so now I'm a little timid, but I can go back to it. I just want to. We'll start with the niceties, and then if it gets a little more aggressive, we'll see. I'll see. You said you're tired, so I don't want to be too aggressive on you, but we'll see how it goes. Does that sound fair?
Sure.
Yeah, I am big A atheist to the Christian God though. I feel like just because there are some eternal.
Can I just pause that? I'm not trying
Yeah,
to get you. I just want to be clear. So,
yeah.
are you atheist towards the Christian God, but agnostic towards any sort of deity?
So I'm agnostic towards all deities. There are some deities that are defined really weirdly that I kind of believe in just because of how the nature of their definition is. So one of these, for example, would be pantheism, which I guess I'm a pantheist, but it's really dumb because they just define it as the universe is God, and I believe in the universe. So I guess by their definition, I believe in God. Christianity has a few more qualifiers for their God, and some of those lack internal consistency. And assuming logic to be true, it wouldn't work. So that's why I'm big A atheist towards the Christian God. I'm
Okay.
agnostic towards all God, but all gods. But pantheism, I
Okay.
technically am a pantheist just by definition.
Okay, so
Yeah.
then your contention would be towards like the illogical things in the Christian God. You wouldn't be actually giving me an argument towards atheism and just be an anti Christian argument then.
So I don't think you can have just generally, I don't think you can have an argument for atheism as a lack of belief in
I
God.
know. It's pretty crazy,
Yeah.
eh? No arguments for atheism.
Yeah, but that's just because it's a really weird. It's there's some things that I could explain it, but we'd have to get into a lot of philosophy. But just mostly you have to make axioms, and if you lack a belief in an axiom, you don't explain why you lack a belief in an axiom. You just lack that belief in the axiom. You don't make arguments for lacks of beliefs in like presuppositional statements. It doesn't make sense. Like you don't. Yeah, like you're not like I know this is so stupid to say, but you're not like an a leprechaunist, are you? Right? You don't argue why you like don't believe you just don't believe in leprechauns.
So yeah, I understand what you're saying, but what
Yeah.
I think atheist is not just saying that they're, you know, I do not believe in a God. It's more along saying also that naturalism is the only method.
Yeah, so that is some atheists. That's why I said I'm big A atheist towards the Christian God. I actively reject and make a positive claim the Christian God can't exist given certain properties, as it is defined in its own nature. So that's why I'm big A atheist towards the Christian God, but I'm agnostic towards all general deities. Does
Okay,
that make sense?
sure. So what's your contention? What's your like illogical things about the Christian God?
Yeah, so there's two ways we can go through this. We can go through why I don't think that the precepts that are made for Christianity are
So
reasonable in the first place, or we can go through given certain like an internal critique. I can grant your axioms, your epistemological thought. So I believe you would believe in like divine revelation, right? So
So
you can
so
trust what you believe because it's divinely inspired.
let me just ask a real quick question. Is this a
Mhm.
contention
Yeah.
towards classical or open theism?
Sorry, could you explain that?
So classical theism would be like God's immutability, unchanging, being the first mover, first cause. Open theism actually holds to the idea that God can change, has thoughts, learns things, grows.
Um,
This would be two different versions of like the philosophical concepts of Christianity.
it depends because, like I said, depending on how you define God and open theism, I guess I would have to believe in it because I believe in certain things. And under those beliefs, I would have to believe in it just because of the other things I believe in. I would be more against the classical theism than the trinomial traits, the immutable, never changing, first mover, all of that. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm a classical theist anyway, so it's no problem.
Cool. So for the first one, I know everyone in the chat's gonna hate me for this, but I absolutely love the problem of evil, love the Euthyphro dilemma. So if we're gonna go down we could start with an internal critique. You know what those are, right? I think we were talking about
Hmm.
them earlier. Yeah, so obviously this is granting your worldview and assuming logic exists in your worldview. Certain things cannot be the case. I think one of them would be God can't logically be contradictory, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, so I already have a problem with this. So a lot of Christians define God as all powerful, and I like to ask, what do you mean by all powerful? And a lot of them say God can do all possible things, but he can't do logically impossible things. This already sounds like a nonsensical statement to me because all things can only do logically possible things, assuming basic logic, as in there's other forms of logic, but assuming we're talking about basic logic. I am not the kind of being that can jump to the moon. I am only the kind of being that can jump at max 2 feet in the air, right? So all things can only do the logically possible things they can do. So it kind of seems like under that definition, all things are all powerful. Do you
Yeah,
have a
yeah,
contention with that,
yeah.
or
So the problem is in the word how you're talking about all logically possible things. Yeah, of
yeah,
course it's not logically possible that you can jump to the moon and back, but we're talking
mm,
about things that are just logically possible in general. So for example,
true,
God
yeah.
can do anything within the realms of power that do not break the laws of like contradiction, identity, and
Mm.
excluded middle.
Yeah, so again, all things in the realm of power kind of seem weird here. So one of the things I have a huge contention with, and this is like the obvious one, is water into wine. This doesn't seem possible. Even some people say that God has all metaphysical possibility, and humans are grounded by metaphysical possibility. So God could do things that's possible, but can't exist just in our world, but could exist in other worlds. I don't like this because we can't observe other worlds, so we can't
So
prove that
so are
those
you a
things are possible.
necessarianist?
Could you explain that?
So you don't hold to possible world theology. You just say there's just necessary things. So for example,
Oh,
turning water to
yeah.
wine is an impossibility. It
Because
necessarily
it's
couldn't
not, yeah,
happen in any world.
yeah, or it couldn't happen in the way that it's described instantaneously without some huge explosion because of change in energy and all of that. Of course, water could turn into wine given certain properties of the atoms, but those just can't naturally occur within the given time span that it was said to occur.
Sure.
Yeah.
So then I just have to raise the question: Why? Why can't water instantaneously turn into wine? Given that there would be some sort of like omnipotent being that could do that.
Sure. So now we move away from an internal critique, which would be what are the axioms that we assign to the universe. So we could do that. But for the reasoning, this is why I like the problem of evil. I gave the example for the water to wine one. This is a very clear one. The problem of evil is exactly this, but stated in a different way. We can do the problem of evil, and then we can see
Well,
how that
so
goes. And
I got to pause you though, because like the thing
yeah,
is, you're bringing up like I don't agree
yeah.
that these possibilities could happen, but then you're saying it's like an internal critique, and
Oh, I was
internally,
saying I don't believe that. So I
okay,
don't think water could turn to wine. I'm saying in your world, water could turn to wine as you define God as being able to do that, but you would have to get rid of other things
you have to get
for
rid
that
of.
to be the case.
Why would
Yeah.
you have to get rid of other things?
You would have to make a special case for God being able to change atomic structures, such as the fact that he could turn water into wine without having. This is why I want to go like over the problem of evil. This is a very good example of it, but we could go with this water into
Well,
wine one.
we can go into the problem evil if you want. That's
Sure.
I don't care either one.
Oh, sure. But just to finish off with the water into wine thing, if you say that God could turn water into wine, you're losing. You're losing, I think, one of the logical laws of logic, as in it's not possible to turn water into wine within
Which law of
10
logic is that
seconds.
breaking?
Or I guess it wouldn't be necessarily a law of logic. It would just be the possibility for atoms to restructure themselves
Right. So
without.
what you're talking about is metaphysical possibilities, not logical possibilities. You're saying it's metaphysically impossible, not logically
Well, we
impossible.
say it's logically impossible because we make our laws of logic based off of observation. So water is
Well, hold
water
on. You
and
think
one
we made
is.
the laws of logic?
Yeah, so there is a huge debate if the laws of logic are made. So actually, we can go ahead. You can explain why you believe the laws of logic are observed and not made up, and I can explain why I don't believe that.
I simply, by the matter that we cannot have things like square round rooms.
Yeah, so those are again. So now we've moved away because now we're getting to tautologies, axioms. So a really good example of this. Do you know what Goldbach's conjecture is?
No.
Okay, so it's actually super fun. So Goldbach's, I believe, I'm not a huge math nerd, but this is a really interesting one. Goldbach's conjecture states that all numbers, all real numbers above two, are the sum of prime numbers. And this seems to be true. So like three, four, five, six, seven, eight, all of them are the sum of two prime numbers. And it seems to be true, but there is no mathematical proof for it yet. And you actually win like $1 million if you can prove it. But
Mm-hmm.
there seems to be some truths that we just can't come to the conclusion with the knowledge we have. So in the system of math, where one equals one, this is a tautology. It is a law of logic. One will always equal one in the system of math. It does seem to be the case that all real numbers above two are the sum of two prime numbers. It's just that the laws we've made, we can't prove that. Right. So this is why I believe the laws of logic are created. Another really good
Well,
example
I
is,
don't think that logically follows, right? Because we cannot prove
yeah,
it, but yet it holds to, the systems that we have implemented, right? It just means that we're missing an aspect of like understanding. I don't think that we can conclude that the laws of logic are invented because of that.
no, I'm not saying that's why the laws of logic are invented. I'm saying math is a logical system. It is a
Yes.
language that we created. It is. I
Well,
believe it's
pause, because I
arbitrary. Yeah.
disagree with that though, because I think math is a language that we created that represents true like ontological properties. So that'd be like the
You
laws
could
of logic.
say that. I would disagree with that just because language, you could just make the same argument that language is arbitrary, but it represents ontological things.
I do say that. I say that with language
Yeah.
too. Yeah.
So, but that would still just mean that math is arbitrary. The math that we
The
write, the ones that we code into calculators, that's absolutely, we could just change the systems and it would still work.
So the
Right.
representation of like two, right? What
Yeah.
two is,
Yeah.
what that represents is like an ontological real thing. So like if we have two moons or two suns or two things on my desk, the sound, the language that I'm using that represents that,
And the symbol, of course, are arbitrary
yeah,
completely.
are arbitrary. But what it represents is an actual thing that exists.
Yeah, I agree. The only issue I have with that is because when you say we have two moons or two suns, you have to make a statement of what moons and suns are. Like you can't define what moons and suns are without setting axioms
Right.
already.
Here's the thing. You're actually making an argument that's used for God because I'm not going to use that
Wait,
argument because
can I just really go quickly with the math thing and then we
yeah,
can
yeah.
go
Well,
through?
I'm not going to bring up the argument. I
Okay.
just want to
Yeah.
quickly touch on this because I don't know it
Sure.
that well to bring it up. But there is an argument that people use for God off the simple fact that we don't know how language actually comes to be or how we understand it, and they connect that to God somehow. So
Yeah. So I believe those are all non sequiturs just because we obviously don't have an objective language.
well,
People say
I just
math.
brought that up for fun.
Yeah, yeah, I know. And I'm sure that's the reason you're not using that. I mean, I don't think I've very rarely heard that argument. I think it's personally a bad argument. I think there are some good arguments for God, but that one's, I don't like it just because it seems to be completely arbitrary and it's an entirely a non sequitur. Because we obviously don't have an objective language. Even math is completely arbitrary. And the laws of logic are the same way. We define the laws of logic. Another really great example is, I'm
Well,
sorry, I'm going.
I still don't agree that math is arbitrary.
Sure, I can give a really good example. So for Pythagorean theorem, right, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. By the definition of having a 3, 4, 5 triangle, so one side is three, one side is four, and then the long side is five. By saying one side is three and one side is four, in order for it to be a triangle, you are already defining that other side as being five. There's no way around it. There's no way you can have a triangle where one side is three, one side is four, and the other side is not five just because that's what you are defining as a triangle and you're defining as the shapes.
So I'm not too familiar with that, but I am familiar that axioms, if you change the axioms, can change the set of rules.
Yes.
I'm talking about what mathematics represents. I believe this is
Yeah.
like it exists metaphysically,
Yeah.
and
So
I don't see why what you said makes me think that it's arbitrary.
so when we talk about the laws of logic, we're literally just talking about something that is literally we're communicating something. And
Mm-hmm.
we've already had presupposed axioms. One of the laws of logic is the law of identity, A equals A, right?
Yep.
But in order to say A equals A, we need to already define what A is. I don't think A exists in the universe as something that non-observers can observe. That doesn't make sense. We have to state what A is as an observer.
Sure. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. So once we do that, we already have a presupposed axiom. And then once we say A equals A, that is a tautology, right? So it is no longer an ontological truth. Now it's an epistemological truth
No,
based on.
no. So we have issues with definition. So for example, like this is the huge problem with the law of identity. Like how do we figure out how I am identical to being me, right? If I take my mind and I transfer it to somebody else's body, is that still identically me?
Exactly. Yeah.
There's a whole bunch of problems with that. But I think the problem is not in the equation. I think the problem is in the definition. So that's why we look at like this mathematical things of like one being the representation.
But those are languages, those are systems we built. One is
but hold on. Let me land the plane though.
Yeah,
One is the language that we've invented, but one is the representation of the idea, right? The idea being the totality of something's identity. Now we have an issue with like defining what the totality is, but if we could define what the totality of something's identity is, like let's say we could say that my identity is the molecules, the brain, my conscious thought. Like let's say we could define that, right? That one would represent that. And I could only be that. That would be the law of identity. That's something that exists in ontology. So I think the issue is in definition, not the fact that it's abstract.
But as you said, that what you're saying you are is the molecules. You're already using a system of logic there.
Well, I'm saying no. So I gave you an example. I said if we could figure out that it's this, this, and this. I'm not saying it is this and this. I'm saying if we could like discover this, right? Because I'm making the claim that the laws of logic are discoverable. Not that we are inventing, like not that it's like a concept that we've made up. I do believe it's conceptual, right? I do believe it exists in the mind. I actually use this as an argument for God as well with the transcendental, but that's a whole different conversation.
Oh God, no.
I love the transcendental.
Really?
Yeah. Oh yeah, of
the
course.
Tag is,
I love
okay.
tag.
We can go through that. I'm not watching your YouTube chat, so I don't know what they're thinking of me right now. But I hope I'm either doing just as good or just as bad as they hope. So I can stay up for, I guess, like 30 more minutes or not. I work in the morning.
I got about 10 more
see
minutes.
Where this goes. Okay, yeah. So we can run into one of the arguments. Let me know what your chat thinks, and then we can run through it. And then
so I want to just kind of skip over this because I feel like we've started a non sequitur. I think we're going to have a long conversation about logic and identity, and I think we're both going to hit a conclusion at the end where it says, "I'm not convinced that it's conceptual. You're not convinced that it's ontological." So I think we should just agree to disagree if you're okay with that, and then move to the problem evil, which you wanted to discuss.
Yeah, sure. So we can agree that we have different epistemologies. That's totally fine. I believe reality is the basis of reality, which seems circular, and you believe God is the basis of reality, which is technically is also circular. But that's just where we diverge as an atheist and a Christian, right?
I wouldn't say it's circular, but either way, let's move forward.
Yeah, okay, sure. So for the problem of evil, one of the things that seems a very famous philosopher, William Lane Craig, he takes the problem of evil. Let me just throw you with what I think the best syllogism is. For the problem of evil, I'll give you the definitions and we can see where we go from there. So God has certain traits, the triomny traits, all loving, all powerful, all good.
Mm-hmm.
God cannot do something ungodly, right? Would be contradicting the law of identity. He cannot be something that is of not himself. Do we agree with those so far?
So I agree with that, but just so you know, I don't take William Lane Craig's stance on the problem of evil.
Oh, so his claim, just for the people who don't know, his claim is that God isn't required to do to stop evil. That's his solution to the problem of evil. But we can go through it, and then I can hear your stance, or you can give your stance, and we can go through it.
You go through it.
Yeah. So do we agree with those first few?
Can you give me the premises again?
Oh, sure. So God has certain properties: all good, all loving, all powerful.
I agree. Yeah.
Yep. God cannot do something that is of not his nature, so he can't do something that is not of him.
Yep.
Right. Okay. And then good is defined by God.
Good is defined by I don't think God defines good. I think God is good.
Is good. Yeah. Yep. So good is a nature of God.
Yes.
Yeah. Would you be? This is where I think I lose a lot of this. Would you say evil is ungodly or not of God?
So I'd say evil is the absence of being. Being good. So something is good when it's in its perfect state of being. Something that loses its state of being is evil when you take it away from that.
So it would be the same thing because we just define good as godly.
Yeah. So it is, but I just being clear on my definition.
Yeah. But then would it be okay to say that evil is ungodly or non-godly?
So evil, yeah, I would agree with that, sure.
Okay, so and then the second premise would be God, since He is all loving. Well, it doesn't even matter. God would not be able to allow ungodliness or evil, right?
No, I don't agree with that.
Okay, so you think God could allow ungodliness,
Yes.
and why is that?
Well, so here's the thing. As long as it's logically possible that he could, I can accept that. But
Uh,
I am willing to answer why that is.
yeah,
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of reasons why. I think for one, ungodliness actually leads to better goods than you could have without having ungodliness. That'd be one aspect. Then there's obviously the soul building
oh,
theodicy.
theodicies. I don't. Okay, so actually, you can finish, and then I'll go.
No, no.
Go ahead.
Well, if you know the theodicies, I'll just say the theodicies.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so there's two major issues I have with theodicies. One of them is they're all arguments for ignorance. You just don't know. You're simply just guessing, right? I don't know why God would allow evil. These might be some reasons.
Sure.
And the second one is all of them have to limit God in some manner.
No,
And it's
I
really
don't think
fun.
they limit it. I agree with your first premise,
Mhm.
right? That it is it's an argument
Yeah,
from ignorance. I don't
I'm really
agree with
glad
your
you agree with that. A lot of
second
theists
premise.
don't. Yeah. All right, so I can explain that one. So it's really funny. The only time I hear Christians ever argue God as being like a limited being is for the argument of evil. So very similarly, someone always asks me, they're always like, if a parent was teaching their kid to ride a bike, do you think the parent has to let the kid fall in order to learn to ride the
Right.
bike?
So this is where I reject it. I
Okay.
don't yeah, so I don't agree that evil is necessary. I don't think it's necessary to for it to be.
Oh, so if evil is unnecessary, God absolutely could not. He couldn't allow unnecessary evil. Allowing unnecessary evil is unloving.
No, I don't agree with that because I hold to the defeater argument. Are you familiar with that?
Mm, go ahead and give it to me, just so
Yeah, so the defeater argument is that there is unnecessary evils. Unnecessary evils
mm,
do exist. It doesn't need to be, but God still uses it. He changes it. So it's not necessary that, for example, I fall off the bicycle and hurt my arm. That doesn't have to happen. But
but
because it
then
did, but because it
mm,
did happen, God changes the foreseeable future, the outcome, and He uses that for the soul building or the defeat or just simply giving me more than I would have had to endure on this earth. So in
so
short, when I get let me land the plane.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
When I get to this next life, when I get to God, I will know the evils I endured and I'll retroactively agree with the evils I had to endure and be okay with it considering the state I'm in now.
So my only issue with that is you just described unnecessary evil as godly, right? So you said that not only does God allow it, but God actively uses it, perpetuates it, and influences it.
So no,
So
God
ultimately, it
defeats
is
it.
godly.
God defeats it.
Yeah, but it's still a part of his being to do so.
Yeah, I don't understand the contention.
So if we define evil as ungodliness and we define unnecessary evil as unnecessary ungodliness, saying
Okay,
God,
I understand. You're just saying all things
yeah,
considered.
no, I'm saying by the nature of what we're defining evil as and what we're defining unnecessary as, I don't understand. You either have to say that unnecessary evil is not unloving, so parents could cause unnecessary evil and still be loving. And even if
Well,
you define loving
there's
as
an issue. You're
godly,
saying that God is
yeah,
causing the unnecessary evil. I don't agree with that.
or sorry, allowing for it. You would say allowing unnecessary
Yeah,
evil,
allowing it to
right?
happen. Yeah.
Yeah. So like I had a debate with a friend on this and he just bit the bullet. I said if a parent doesn't need to abuse their kid to discipline them. But oh sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed. Can I say that on
No, that's fine. Yeah.
okay, a parent doesn't need to abuse their kid to discipline them, but abuse is a way you can discipline a kid.
Yeah.
And I would say that's pretty unloving. And he just bit the bullet and he said, no, God does abuse us and it's still loving. And I was like, okay, so then you think that parents who abuse their kids can still be all loving? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, I don't agree with that. But if you bite the bullet on that, there's nothing I could do. That's one of the defeaters for the problem of evil. You simply say there is no evil in the world. For any Christians who want a really easy defeater for it, you could just say that. You kind of seem psychotic, but it's a
Yeah,
defeater.
I wouldn't say
Uh,
that.
yeah, but this one I don't get because if you say that God can allow evil and still maintain his all goodness or his godliness and maintain his love, and if you define love also by godliness, then it doesn't make sense to say that unnecessary suffering, you could say, is ungodly. It is godly. It is literally what God does.
No, so again, that's implying that the unnecessary suffering, that God is the causal effect of that. Now you can argue
No,
like deterministic
allowing
point of view.
unnecessary suffering, not causing it, allowing it.
So
So if a
yeah.
parent allows unnecessary suffering, they're also godly, also good, also loving.
So what I'm saying is that the unnecessary thing happens. It doesn't need to be. The evil that the person endures does not have to happen. And that could be a necessary consequence because of free will. So for example, like the Holocaust.
Well, it can't be necessary because God can prevent it.
So
Nothing is necessary under God.
Right, but there are logical like contingencies, right? So for example, a necessary consequence. So if I do A, necessarily B must happen. So
no, not under a Christian worldview.
Why not?
Is God limited by the laws of logic?
Yes.
He is?
Yes.
So how is the laws of logic not transcendental to God?
It's not transcendental. It's equal to his nature.
Is it not above his nature if he is limited by it?
It's in his nature. It's equal to him.
That doesn't. If God is limited by God.
God is limited by his own ontology. Yes, his own nature. We established this in the start of the conversation.
Yeah, but you're already presupposing logic there. Right.
So I think logic. This is why we talked about the transcendental. I think logic is grounded in the mind of God, and God being immutable, it doesn't change. Therefore, it's an eternal property of his.
But you're using a law of logic to determine that. So you had to come up with a law of logic first, and then define God by that law of logic. Even if you give him that property.
Yeah, but I don't see a contention with that, because for me to even discuss the law of logics, I have to presuppose logic.
Yeah, but that's fine. You can do that, but you just have to make logic transcendental to God to do that.
I don't have to make it transcendental because it's equal to, right? It has the same identity. It's one to one.
It's kind of like the Euthyphro dilemma. It's like saying if God is the basis of logic,
right? Are you familiar with divine simplicity?
No, can't be with it.
So I'm a divine. So I hold to divine simplicity, right? And it's the idea that God is not complex; He is simple, right? There's just God.
Oh, you gotta be really careful with how you define those words.
Why?
Because I'm not sure how you're using them, and I feel like it could be a really slippery use of wordplay.
This isn't the. Here's the thing: if you're going to solve the issue for divine simplicity tonight, my friend, you deserve a medal. This is like a 2,000-year-old theology that's still been going, and people really hold to, and they got doctorates on this.
Oh, I with that.
Yeah. So like this would be like Thomas Aquinas. Are you familiar with him?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this would be like his theology that he kind of like established. This would be held by like the Orthodox Church. This would be held by like the Catholic churches and a lot of the high churches. You got people like Gavin Kerr, who literally has a doctorate in divine simplicity and things like this. So like look, if you got contentions with it, that's fine. People have contentions in divine simplicity, but I'm just saying, if you're saying I'm on a slippery slope with these words, you got to wrestle with some like really heavy hitters in philosophy.
Sure. Yeah. My big issue with it is you can't start with a system of logic in order to apply that system of logic to God.
Yeah, you can. It's axiomatic. It's axiomatic. Yeah. So this is where I go to like divine simplicity, because I need to use logic to prove logic. Right? It's axiomatic. It seems to be circular on the surface. It's not. I don't think it is, but it seems to be circular.
That is circular.
So it seems
all precepts are circular.
Okay. So for the sake of argument, to move the conversation, I'll say it's circular. Mm-hmm. Right now, God's nature being simple, not complex, things that come from God, the properties that come from God, are equal to God. It's one to God. Right. So there's no separation. There's no complex parts that move around. So the laws
come from God or of God?
They're of God.
Okay, so not come from God.
Yeah, so they're of God. Okay. Yeah, so they're not complex. They don't move around. There's no changing parts. There's no immutability to God. So when we're talking about things like love, omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient, the laws of logic, all these things are equal to the oneness of God, His nature.
Yeah, but you already started with your precept. You started with logic, literally in that explanation.
Right, but that's
you didn't start with God.
So that's the thing. I have logic. I use logic to prove logic. Logic is equal to God. That's
your first precept.
Right, that's fine. Already. That's fine. So I have a presupposition that logic exists. Logic is equal to God. So using the logic to prove logic, which is God, isn't an issue.
Yeah, but you see how you're flipping the transcendental argument. Because in the transcendental argument, you start with God to use logic, but now you're starting with logic.
No, the transcendental argument says what I say. It doesn't come from God. It is equal to His nature.
I'm not saying it comes from God. I'm just saying your first precept is logic.
What the problem is in your argumentation is you're creating the distinction. What I'm saying is there is no distinction.
So your definition of God is logic?
So that would be in the definition.
So that's a tautology. God is logic and logic is God.
Yes, it's equal to each other.
Not equal to, they would have to be the same thing.
They're one. There's no different identity. That's what I'm trying to tell you in simplicity.
Okay. So, okay.
Is one to one. So when we're talking about like logic, so logic, right? So this is divine energy. This is energy essence distinction, right? So we have God and we have the creature. So we have creator creature. The creature has this interaction with God where we make these distinctions or make these separations. When God interacts with us, we see these properties, we see these energies. So the best metaphor that I've heard is that imagine the sun reflects off the surface of water, hits you in the face, right? You're feeling the energies from the sun, but it's not directly to him. So from the creature, we have limited understanding, limited perspectives, but from the creator, right? We have this thing that is equal to itself. It has a singular definition. In that singular definition, it includes all these things that we have made distinctions of, like logic, like love, like morality, like omnipresence, omnipotent, omniscience. These are all equal to one God.
Mm-hmm. That's fine. The only thing that I literally have no problem with that. The only thing that I think you would disagree with kind of seems to like lead to pantheism, right? Because if you're defining logic as God, if you say something is logical, you're also saying it's godly.
If something is logical, yeah, it's godly. So is love. So like if I show you love, that's a godly logical thing. Sorry, say that again.
What isn't logical?
What isn't logical?
Yeah.
A square round circle.
So nothing that exists is not logical.
All things that exist
are logical.
Are logical, yeah.
All things that exist are godly.
Yes.
That's just pantheism.
How's that pantheism?
Because all things that exist are godly, are God's nature, of God.
Are not of God, right? So this is where we're going. We're getting a lot into like more like Thomistic kind of viewpoints and metaphysics here. So when God looks at creation, God doesn't look extrinsically, he looks intrinsically. Now, intrinsically does not mean you are God. It means you are sustained from God, but God is the sum of all things. He's the sum of all that exists.
That just sounds like pantheism again.
It does sound, but the difference between pantheism depends on how you view pantheism, because you say you're part of the universe and things like that. The pantheist,
it says that God is reality. That is, it's just a simple tautology.
Yeah, so God is reality, God is existence. Yes. Yeah, I agree with that.
That seems like what you're saying right now.
Yeah, that this is classical theism.
So you would also be a pantheist.
If that's your definition of pantheism, sure.
Sure, but then you also say there's no evil in the world because there are no ungodly things that are separate from God. You just said that all things that exist are logical. All things that are logical are of God.
Right. So this is why I was clear on my definitions, right? Because evil, right, is the anything that takes away from the state of being, state of your goodness.
Said all things that are being are of God. That's like what you just said.
Right. So if I'm in my state of being, if I'm in my essence, the way I'm supposed to be, the way that God created me intrinsically to his nature, right? I am something that is good. I am something of God. If for somehow my hand got cut off, I'm no longer in my state of being, the intended state of creation. This is something that is not of God.
Well, now you're making like a teleological argument. You're making like a naturalism argument. I don't understand that. You just said that all things that exist are logical. Illogical things cannot exist.
Yeah.
And then you just said logic is of God.
Yes. I don't see a symmetry breaker here.
Well, if you make God a tautology for logic, you could just switch God in for logic.
You could, sure.
Yeah, so evil can't exist.
But the problem is you're kind of ignoring the energy essence distinction thing that I was talking about, right? Logic isn't the totality of God, right? That's the creature's perspective from God interacting with us.
Wait, that's where we're making the separation. You defined the sum of God as logic.
I said logic is equal to God.
Yeah, you made it a tautology, and that's why I asked.
So I'll explain it. I'll explain it again, right? Okay. So we have God, right? In God, from the creature's perspective, we see these properties, these separate things that aren't separate, right? So we see things like logic, morality, omniscience, omnipresence, all these things, all these properties that we give to God, we see them. Now we would say these are separate parts from the creature's perspective. But when we're talking about God's nature from the creator's perspective, all these things are equal to one thing. They are all equal to one. That's the separation. So when we speak from the creature's perspective, we say, well, the totality of God is logic. That doesn't make sense from the creature's perspective. All the things that is the totality of God.
That's fine, but that I don't know how you could say no. I don't know how you could say evil is separation of God and also say all things that are logical are of God and illogical things can exist, but also separation from God exists.
So, but you're kind of focusing on just the logic aspect.
You made it a tautology.
Right. So I'm not going to explain it again. I usually just do 2 or 3 times. If somebody doesn't get it, I got to move on.
Sure, we can move on, but just for the problem of evil, how this can I just go over how it fits in, and then we can just you can head to bed. I'll come in for the next live stream.
Sure.
I don't understand if we were to fit this into the problem of evil. It kind of just seems like you're getting rid of the last premise that no evil exists now.
No, I still agree with that evil exists.
Okay, sorry, I apologize. Can we run it through one more time, and then I promise you can head to bed because I'm really not getting like this one. So if we don't want to say that logic is above God, and we want to say logic is equal to God, that it's an ontological property of God, and we want to say that another property of God is that he cannot be illogical, that he has to be himself, he has to be what he is, such that he has to be logical or be logic. And what are we defining evil as here?
Evil is anything that takes away from your state of being.
Okay. And then what do we want to define being as here?
Being as would be like your state of existence, right? So
what do we want to define existence as?
God would be existence. So anything that puts you closer to your state of existence, brings you closer to God, brings you closer to the perfection that you're supposed to be, is a good thing.
Supposed to be. Okay. Not what you like literally are.
No.
Okay. So I feel like now we're hitting another theodicy, because when you say I'm talking about the logic problem of evil, there are other ones. So there's like the evidential problem of evil, there's animal suffering and all of that. I think those are all boring and they don't matter because
that's really weird. Most people throw away like no philosopher really in like the higher grade takes the logical problem of evil seriously anymore, but they take the evidential problem seriously.
And this is gonna sound like a huge quote from an atheist, and you're gonna laugh at me. I legit just think that's because no theist will ever respond to the logical problem of evil on a serious basis. I think it's just like a brick wall.
I don't agree with that, because you got people like Anthony Flew who literally was it Flew? No, who the hell was it? Nietzsche? No. Anyways, there's a really famous philosopher who did like this whole ridiculous argument about why miracles couldn't exist, and I think
miracles could exist either.
I know, but the way his argument was presented, I think, was ridiculous. And part of his argument was, for example, if God existed, who the hell was this now? If God no, it wasn't Flew. He said, if God existed, you would expect to see God interact with us, and that's a reason not to believe God existed. And it's like, okay, well, Jesus Christ and the cross. So it was just a really weird argument. So I think just because
that is a weird argument. Yeah, I don't know what that argument is.
Yeah, it's a stupid argument. But yeah, just because Christians won't accept something, I don't think that means philosophers aren't going to take it on. People like, look, you got what's. I'm
not saying philosophers won't. I think it's just a brick wall for most theists. Like they just won't respond to it. It's just like it's dead in the water conversation.
Well, yeah,
that's just my belief. I think you think I'm coping, and I probably am coping, but this is legitimately why I think it is. I need to do more reading on it. I'll be honest, but this is just what I think. Like if you saw the Alex O'Connor versus the Nettles, like they would barely even respond to the problem of animal suffering.
Well, that's an evidential problem of evil.
It is, yeah, and that's because I think that when he offered the logical one, they just ignore it. I think it's a really hard thing.
Just real quick, people did correct me in the chat. It is Anthony Flew who said that.
All right, I'll definitely look into that. So I feel like when you say the nature of what things should be, or your perfect in design or your intention, now I feel like we're making a theodicy again, which is God allows evil in order for you to. That doesn't. I don't even know why he'd allow evil. Then I don't know why he'd allow you to ever be not part of as you design. Then it just becomes a free will theodicy.
So for example, like the reason he would allow evil is for something like sacrificial love. So God is in a perfect state of being, like his existence is perfect, but that doesn't necessarily mean existence in itself. Like you couldn't have a better perfection. So for example, are you aware of the concept that like mathematically we can have an infinite and then we can have bigger infinites?
Yeah. So like there's numbers between 1 and 2, an infinite amount of numbers, but there's also an infinite amount of numbers of n+1.
Yeah. So we have a perfect God based off the definition, lacks nothing, doesn't need anything, but through creating things that like lack, like us, that can have things like sacrificial love, we end up with like a better good and a better perfection than we would have had without it.
I don't like that because of how definitions work there. When you say perfect God, you're already defining as perfect to be God. And when you say better, you're saying more godly,
Hmm.
right? So I that doesn't even make sense. It's like saying if a perfect painter painted something, but he didn't have the perfect paint. That doesn't make sense because the only thing that he could have
Well,
is
he
perfect
does
paint.
have the perfect paint.
Yeah, so how could he ever make an imperfect painting?
He's not making an imperfect painting
So how could there be something imperfect such as evil?
because we're creating that painting. That's what we're going through right now.
What do you mean we're creating it?
So God's painting, right?
Yeah.
So as he's painting, this is actually like an analogy that's used for the problem of evil. Like let's imagine you have this picture. It's all made of like glass parts. You zoom in on like what is it called when you have glass window? What's it called? Glass
Glass?
window that makes an image.
I don't know what you're talking about.
So
Sorry.
somebody in the chat help me out. It's very common in churches. Stained glass window,
Like stained
stained
glass?
glass. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have
Oh,
this
okay.
stained glass image window. Now you zoom in on a piece of glass, and that glass, you're looking at it really close, and it looks really ugly. Doesn't look like it belongs. Looks like it's imperfect. It shouldn't be there. Doesn't make sense. But then when you zoom out, you see the whole picture of the stained glass, and you see this beautiful image, and it's perfect. So God
Yeah.
does have the perfect paint, does have the perfect painting, but we're zooming in.
Yeah, I feel like you're just making a justified evil. I don't think it would be another soul building theology. Like,
Well, it just seems like any theodicy I bring up, you just kind of throw away. Like just, oh,
yeah, that's
theodicy.
so. I'll explain. Like, how about we start from making the glass and then or making the stained window, right? Because now we're starting with a finished product and already assuming there's something imperfect about it. Why don't we start with no product at all and then go to how it became imperfect, right? And
So
then it seems a lot
From
more
God's
obvious.
perspective,
Yeah.
the stained glass window is made. It's done. God exists outside of time. It's us in our
No, I
perspective.
know,
We
but he
exist
did
in the
create
window.
the stained glass, right?
Yeah.
He did create the stained glass, though,
Uh-huh.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so obviously there was a point before the stained glass exists and then it was created.
From God's perspective, no.
Yeah. How did he create it then? Creation literally
Yeah.
means there was a time before it existed.
So this is why we say God is pure act, right? This is the classical viewpoint of God. He's pure actualization. If we say that he is and then he isn't and then he is, then we end up with all the ontological properties or ontological problems that I gave during my contingency argument. So he has to be pure
I reject the
actualization.
contingency argument entirely just as I don't think things can be other than exactly what they are. Your sweater can't be any other color than what your sweater is, or it wouldn't be
Yeah,
your
you're a
sweater. Yeah.
necessitarian
So
or whatever it's called.
I just reject that
Yeah,
entire
okay,
yeah.
it's fine. You
Um,
reject it. I don't see a
sure.
reason to, but that's a whole nother conversation. But
Yeah.
the argument I'm bringing forward is that God is pure actualization. God is simply just creating. Everything that God does happens in a singular moment because he's not in time. There's never a point where he's not and then he is.
That's fine. Again, you're going to run into some other issues. The best one, and Alex O'Connor explains this a lot better than me, so you should watch his video on Grant Debunk.
I've met Alex O'Connor.
Oh,
Yeah.
nice. Jealous. Yeah, that's super cool. But his explanation for this is in order for God to stay the same, he has to have the potential to stay the same. And he would be the only thing in the universe
Yeah.
with
So,
his potential.
yeah, if you just wanted to appeal to Alex O'Connor, both Phaser and Phaser.
Oh, I'm just saying he would explain it better than me because
Hold
I
on,
think
no,
it's an
but the
art.
argument that you're bringing up from Alex O'Connor about the necessary principles of the chair being yellow, Phaser, what the heck's his name? Oh my God,
Edward.
Council of Trent, and then even his buddy Joe Schmid, who's an
Mhm.
atheist agnostic, all refuted him on that.
Do you have the argument for what the refutation was?
Yeah, just go to Joe Schmid video on it. Just look up Joe Schmid, Alex O'Connor,
Oh,
you'll find it.
I'll totally watch that. That seems, yeah, I want to see that. I was just wondering if you had it on off the top of your head.
No, I don't have the top
Um,
of my head. Like
uh,
you're just referring to the Alex O'Connor thing. I'm just referring to Joe Schmid refuting him on it.
well, I give the actual argument for what it was. I was wondering if you had your argument, the argument against it off the top of your head. But that's fine. If I'll watch that and then I'll get back to you on that one.
Trent Horn, that was his name, not Council Trent. So yeah,
Oh yeah,
Phaser, Trent Horn,
Yes, I know Trent Horn. Yeah.
and Joe Schmid all refuted him on that specific thing. Said he was wrong.
Yeah. So also that's a one. If there is a refutation for that, the other one, I don't know what existence means to be, what it means to exist outside of space, time, and matter. So the word I would use is supernatural.
I got to go to bed,
Because
bro. I already
oh
went
yeah,
45 minutes past, or 30,
oh
15 minutes past.
yeah,
I was supposed to clock out with you.
sure.
It's like almost 3 a.m. here.
That's fair. Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
see you later.
All right, bro.
See ya.
God bless. Nice guy, good conversation. I don't think he's a Fedora atheist at all. Fedora atheist, listen, guys, I love the Fedora atheist argument, but it's for the people who come up, oh my God, how do you trust the Bible? It's all like Santa Claus. I'm sure you believe in fairy tales too, you moron. Those are Fedora atheists. That's just like a legit atheist who has like philosophical reasons for why he doesn't believe in God. I don't mind those guys. At least those guys you can have a conversation with. Nice guy. Plus, pray for him. Thumbs up. Congratulations, you made it to the end of the video. If you want to watch more, you can click one of these and you can keep watching.